From the BBC World Service, welcome to the latest edition of the Documentary Podcast. Every week we bring you a range of stories from our presenters and reporters across the world. Please do rate the documentary on your podcast app and leave a comment. Let us know what you think.
Welcome to the Solomon Islands. I'm Regina Lepping, and I've lived all my life in this Commonwealth Pacific country, northeast of Australia and east of Papua New Guinea. A chain of over 900 islands, there are around 70 different languages spoken here, and we're proud of our culture, our traditions, and our rich ocean worlds. When I was a little kid in the late 1990s, the country experienced a violent civil conflict. Rival ethnic groups fought over land and resources. The conflict ended in 2003, and peacekeeping forces left the country last year. But we're now facing another threat. This is Islands on the Front Line on the BBC World Service.
We know that the weather's not behaving as it used to be.
Dry seasons are longer, winds are more stronger.
Before, Solomon Islands have wet season and dry seasons, but it has been very unpredictable now.
The sea level is rising. The tide goes up very high. All the building collapse with the water, and with all this coast torn apart and taken away, and we got all the roots exposed, and it makes people really scared. They just wonder what's happening.
I'm quite aware of some of these issues myself. A few years ago, we had to move a family home back from the sea, dismantle it and rebuild it further inland. Sea levels are rising by about 3 millimeters a year, globally, due to climate change. As well as global warming, strong trade winds have been pushing more water into this part of the Pacific, and the sea is coming up around 3 times faster. At least 5 of our islands have been lost in recent decades, and others are disappearing.
The biggest threat to us here in the Solomon Islands is we are low-lying islands. Most of the villages are by the coast.
Scientist David Bossetto runs an independent environmental research group, Ecological Solutions.
You can see the effect of climate change on coastal erosions, on coastal lines. You can see effects of climate change on fisheries. Not only the population increase that put pressures on fish, but also temperature and acidification of the salt water. Also can see frequent weather patterns of bad weather storms, a lot of more intensified cyclones coming through now. That's the challenge that we have here in the islands, especially during the high tides. You can see that the water is going right into the villages, especially the coastal villages.
My family used to live on an island, but due to sea rise, we have to move inland.
Relinta Manaka's family had to move from their home island to Sumine before she was born. She's heard the oral history from her parents about how seawater came into their village.
Because of that wave that came and destroyed few of the houses, and they were thinking they can't live on that island. Part of it has already been lost, but just a little bit of the island is still there.
I'm in the Western Province, the largest of the country's 9 provinces. It's a chain of coral-fringed islands, home to over 75,000 people. Who better to ask about the effects of climate change here than those who depend on the sea? Iken is a fisherman selling his catch at the local market.
Have you noticed any changes in the weather that affects your fishing?
We cannot predict it now. Before we can predict it, the sea is rough and there's no much fish. I'm very concerned about the weather and the high tide.
So how far do you have to go out to catch fish?
30-minute ride or 40. Before just around here. Now it's hard. You have to go far.
Leo.
On one of the biggest islands, New Georgia, another fisherman, Leo, and his wife, Lesiata, tell me about some of the changes they've experienced.
Sometimes, yeah. This time, this fella high tide, him
go with him rough sea.
Rough sea, also him the strong wind, wave also.
Leo tells me he's still able to catch fish, but they've seen increasingly strong cyclones, high tides, and other impacts closer to home.
This time, kavam na.
Fresh water.
Okay.
They have like a huge well where they have fresh water in it, and it's called Iriri, and now it's invaded with salt water. So even though they build wallstone
sea rise, the high tide kept on coming over and going to the freshwater well. Although they seem to be living with some of its impacts, when I ask them about climate change, they're not really aware of it, as they get on with their lives from day to day. They've never heard of climate change, global warming.
No.
No. That surprised me. It's pretty surprising to hear that, because at the end of the day, they can still fish. But the impacts on the environment, that is very visible. My father is from the Western Province, and we used to come here to New Georgia for family trips when I was a little kid. I haven't been here for years, and I'm keen to see what's changed. It wasn't like this before. Back in 2001, we can still walk over there because it's just sand. And the coconuts up here and huge sand. Looks like the tide really come up this far. Like you hardly see any beach anymore, yeah? So it's just like water's trying to get in everywhere. There's no beach anymore. There's only just right at the edge of the road, everything, and then just water. When I was little, I used to love playing in the freshwater wells or iriris in my village, similar to these coastal villages. So this is the iriri. It's like a freshwater pond that they build around stream coming out from the rocks. They seem to me like something out of a fairy tale. They're not quite so idyllic now. There's a lot of waste floating around over there in the corner. Litter, debris and stuff. This is not even high tide yet. It's starting to come in. The sea's starting to come in. What na name of place? Akindu. Further along the road, there's a larger pool which does look fresh and inviting. So here in this area, there's some young women washing their clothes. And at the other end of the area, we have kids swimming in the refreshing cool water. Kids look like they're enjoying themselves so much. It may look clean, but the villagers tell me the salt water is getting in. Yeah? Does it happen often? Yeah, man. So yeah, they do have salt water coming in from across the road. She said like sometimes they try to wait for the salt water to go back out with the tide, but if it kept on coming in, they just kept on washing their clothes with the water. They're doing the best to build up wall stone defenses to keep the salt water out. But it's hard to see how these young villagers are going to keep these ponds fresh, so close to the rising sea. The Solomon Islands has a very young population. Over 60% of people are under the age of 25, but our culture values the authority of elders, and it's not always easy for youths to take charge of what's happening in their communities.
My community is just a small community, less than maybe 50 people.
Piokera Holland is a field researcher working with coastal people on his home island, Kolombangara. He's helping to preserve some of the traditions which are in danger of being lost.
And this climate change or sea level rise is also an issue for my small community there. So I have to encourage these young people. We have to put hands together because all our elderly people are ready to leave. We are the ones who would face what the future is. So.
In some villages, there are highly venerated cultural areas called taboo sites, where ancestors' bones and other sacred objects are kept. Some of them are right by the sea and vulnerable. Piokera is working with villagers to try and preserve these sacred places and the ancient knowledge they contain.
Some even before we actually go over there and see them, they're already gone.
So when it's washed away, it's gone.
Yeah. These taboo sites, they mean a lot to especially people that settle along each island.
So these are sites like restricted to people and they're
to certain people, to certain clan or tribe.
Very traditional sites, and it has the identity of the people. It helps the people to connect with the land, having a traditional taboo site there. If that place is gone, the people will feel like they're like a sheep without a shepherd or something. Yeah, they're lost because of the traditional, very valued site is gone. I think that's one of the main risks that climate change is having upon the people. Because if you have nothing to hold on to your land, you're without identity, without something to go back home to. The capital of the western province is Gizo. It attracts people from surrounding hills and islands selling their produce. This particular area we're standing on right now, they're selling root crops and more bananas, papaya, vegetables and root crops on the floor, on top of banana leaves. These are people who have gardens. They come down from the hill or sometimes from the island where they grow the root crops. And just outside there, that's where the fishermen come and sell the fishes. I'm taking a boat to one of the smaller islands nearby. I can see there's so many islands around us, and many of the houses are right at the coast, like that one over there, and they're building wall stones up. But there's a little island just a couple of meters out. It's just so small, there's only one tree on it. The sea is just kept on rising.
There used to be another island there, let's say maybe about 5 years ago. It was as small as that one. It's only a sandbank now, so it's really fast. Yeah.
So at Orovai Cottage, this is our island home.
This is Orovai. It's home to the Baya family, including Nagarita and her brother Jeremy.
We have a small eco-tourism establishment. If you snorkel around here, you can see a lot of clams and corals that we have planted. Our island was bought by my grandfather. My grandfather was a sergeant in the army in the Second World War.
Solomon Island invaders mown down when the U.S. Marines took the situation in hand.
During the Second World War, the Solomon Islands, then a British protectorate, was caught in the middle of fierce fighting between Allied and Japanese forces. After the war, some locals were able to buy their own islands.
When he retired from working for the government, they sold him our 3 islands, and he bought them for £5 or something like that. And we've lived there ever since.
Jeremy's father, Patson Baya, has lived on the island his whole life. How much has changed since you lived here on the island?
There are some islands that we know of that were there when I was a child, and it's not there anymore now. The water is temperature rises, and so we have bleaching, so the coral dies.
What have you done in terms of adaptation here on this island?
We have been building seawalls and trying to plant mangroves around the island to protect it from the ocean. We are also thinking about buying land on the mainland and building elsewhere.
So in here, this is where we plant our corals.
They've also developed a small coral and clam farming business, employing local farmers and organizing educational trips for local children.
I think the planting of corals and clams, it's a very sustainable way of earning an income. People just look on the corals just like a rock, But when they learn about it, they do appreciate it more, that they can keep the place beautiful, the ocean. I think for the young people, it's very important for them to understand, because that's their future too, you are going to live in a world that is very, very uncertain.
Climate change is not the only threat here. The Solomons are located in the Pacific Ring of Fire, a string of underwater volcanoes and fault lines. In 2007, Giza was hit by an earthquake
measuring 8.1 on the Richter scale.
It was the worst in over 100 years and caused a tsunami with waves of over 10 feet high.
52 people died and at least 4,000 homes were destroyed or badly damaged. Fishing villages were wiped out.
Photographs also show the scars on mountains from landslides that were triggered in the aftermath. Aid groups are also rushing in emergency food and water, as well as tarps for temporary.
One of the worst-hit villages was Titiana, a fishing community where people live in traditional wooden houses right by the sea.
That morning, we started with earthquake, vigorous earthquake that shook all the whole buildings, and some of the kids were falling down on the sand.
One of the villagers, Sipere, survived by clinging to a sago palm tree.
The first wave struck the land. The second one comes, and everybody washed down to the other side of the hills. And when they are at the other end of the hills, they start to recount, who is alive and who is dead. There's no land to, there's nothing. Everything is just water. Really scary.
After the tsunami, many villages relocated to higher ground, but dependent on the sea for food and income. Quite a few, including Sipere, have moved back down and rebuilt their houses along the coast where the air is cooler. Faced with the prospect of losing more land to sea level rise, Sipere has been burying vegetable waste and other rubbish to build up the sand and extend his beach.
So we're in Sipere's area, and it's a beautiful place near the beach, and it's like a garden. You have trees here, looking down to the shore. You know, the sea is just a couple of meters away from his house. Feel like pretty strong wind too coming in. I remember I was here 5 years ago on this exact beach, and it was like pretty long, yeah? You can actually walk across.
The
water has risen a lot.
We don't want the land to be, taken away by the sea. What I'm doing at the front is that I'm digging the holes. I put all the rubbish in the area, all the waste. There's no waste burned or thrown into the water. You just throw everything into that dish.
Dig a hole,
Yeah,
throw
dig a hole.
everything on it,
Yeah, you don't need
cover it back,
Yeah.
and the sea will just keep on,
Yeah,
the sand will build on it.
You just do that, yeah. I'm quite aware of this waste from the shops, right? Everywhere there's rubbish.
So what normally happens in the communities, like they heap up all the litters, and sometimes they rake it out into the
That's
sea,
common.
and then the sea take it out. By burying them, like how he did it, it's like working with nature, and then it allows the sea to bring up the sand on top of the foundations. It's like a foundation.
It's a way to build a world.
What do you see would be like the future of the beach here?
In the future, we are planning to extend it further. We're going to apply the seawall, the stone, make it more steady. With the seawall, we prefer that's going to be more solid. Probably when you come here next time, maybe another 5 or 10 meters out into the water. And that's going to be nice, eh?
Yeah.
You'll be sitting down on the beach.
Many households in Gizo are dependent on rainwater. With rising temperatures and unpredictable weather patterns, water shortages are becoming increasingly common.
We all know that one of the impacts of climate change is drought. It's becoming more and more apparent nowadays and more frequent.
Henselin Bossetto works on an educational water project with the locals.
In 2015, there was a 3-month drought. All the water tanks went low and empty.
People had to travel across rough sea to a neighboring island for clean water.
People had to go as far as Kolombangara on the boats just to load water over to Gizo. You expect that it is in the wet season that you'll get more rain, or in the dry season that you'll get more dry weather. But it has been very unpredictable now.
So they have water pipes here near this.
In Gizo town, there are several standpipes along the main coast road.
That's where people around here go and wash their clothes or have a shower. So it's just a pipe surrounded by corrugated islands, just to seal it off from privacy when people have a shower.
Water issue has been a problem in Gizo for quite a while, so it's very, very important.
Relinta Manaka also offers training to local residents about how to preserve water.
The project mainly is awareness. I'm trying to get people to have the knowledge of how to use water wisely. Well, according to the 2009 census, we've reached more than 7,000, plus the people that come from outside neighboring islands. But when there's drought, they usually Malakeraba area there, there's
the standpipes.
yeah, that's where they basically come for water for. Apart from tanks, that's the only source that people usually come to.
Those standpipes that we walked past, they're like pretty small, 4 standpipes. And it caters for the whole island. When there's they don't have water, they come down to the standpipes. Seeing the population of Gizo Island and other islanders outside coming into Gizo, I don't think those standpipes can cater for everyone.
Young couple Patrick and Joyce took part in the awareness program. During the drought, they and their children were forced to drink dirty water from rivers.
We have to boil it and then use it for drinking or cooking. So there's a lot of sickness spread, especially diarrheas and
waterborne diseases.
Yeah, waterborne disease. Yeah.
What about the schools? Children at school?
Oh yeah, it affects the student. School closed for almost 2 or 3 months because there is no water.
Joyce and Patrick have 5 rainwater tanks, and they plan to get more, but it may not be enough. They're teaching the children about how to recycle water and conserve it in case of another drought. For Patrick, who comes from a different island, life on Gizo has been an education.
My home, we have lots of water, and this is the place where I come to know that water is the precious thing. For my children, I have to train them how to keep water, and the future of our children is in our hand first. Yeah? We have to show them the road and show them how to manage water.
You wouldn't believe the rain here, like now it's really, really raining heavily. Hearing from what the people say, they have droughts here that lasted for 3 months. And then you have the sun that's like so hot, it dries up the well, yeah? And it's just so unpredictable. I bet that little kid just like went to school, didn't know like it's gonna rain in the afternoon, and now he's soaking wet, heading back home.
Later that evening, once the rain stops, I joined Patrick and Joyce at a youth group they ran in the local church.
My name is Matalita. I'm 28 years old.
My name is Vinana. I'm from Marovo, but I grew up here, so I call Gizo like my home.
I'm keen to find out from these young people whether climate change has much impact on them.
In my island, in Zimbo, you will see where our great-grandparents used to build their house. Now it's underwater.
In the late 90s, it's not very hot, but nowadays it's very hot and it's very dry. In the late 90s, some of our islands here have long beaches, but nowadays you can see that the beaches are short. The sandy beaches are taken away by the sea.
These young women are aware of climate change and its effects, but it's not necessarily the biggest issue in their day-to-day lives.
It's hard to get a job as a Solomon Islander. It's not really easy because of the system in the school. A lot of children, they are bright, but because of the system in the school, you have to reach a certain level and then you pass.
Only 60% of children have access to primary education. For those who do, there are a lot of exams, and if you fail them, you cannot continue.
I think that's our biggest problem here. We have lots of unemployed youths in the Solomons. They are living in the street and doing nothing, but they are bright. They are bright youths.
There are a lot of kids here who don't have any jobs or are not really going to school, and they are just staying around in the villages.
Jeremy Bayer has set up a surfing association to inspire these young people to do something active and engage with the environment.
WSSA stands for the Western Solomon Surfing Association. We started it in 2014. We had about 6 surfers, and then now we have about 30. So we do first aid training for all the teenagers, and we do beach cleanups, surf competitions, and surf coaching.
Back in Titiana village, I meet some of the surfers. This is Nini.
21 years old. That's no big job. You must just go fishing, then come back, then go surf.
He lives here by the sea. He's a fisherman. He's a young fisherman, and his hobby is also surfing.
When I was 9. Not a day me go surf, not a day me go board and break.
Said he started learning at a very young age. He's watching other people's coming surfing, and he reached a point where he just kept on surfing until his body ached and got a lot of injuries. But he just kept on doing it. It's the passion of it.
Me name me Joy. Me from Titiana. I'm 20 years old this year.
Juai is another surfer in the group.
How does being in the water all the time as a surfer, as a person living close to the sea, affects how the way you look at the environment now with all the pollution and stuff like that?
Yeah, what important now for me cleaning then cleaning sea environment for them And even so, if me go safe, place me for play, I'm stay clean now.
It's really important to him, like, to keeping the environment clean and to make sure that, it's not too polluted for the fishes. Keeping his playground clean. That's how I describe the sea, his playground, which is kind of cool. So when they gather together at the beach, they'll just clean it up themselves.
What we're seeing on our islands today will become increasingly common, and we're facing other challenges. Not only global warming, but also finding jobs and making our way in a fast-changing world. But traveling around these islands, I've also found that the young people here are beginning to take matters into their own hands, and it hasn't stopped them dreaming big.
Best lo mita la wish for la go play lo any big contest or something, Olympic or something.
That's a lovely dream. It's like a big dream too for them to one day go and surf in the big surf championships.
Just can ride lemon, can you? Yeah. You go up, then you come down, then you ride, man.
Riding on the wave is his favorite thing. It's like being on top of the wave and gliding along the horizon.
You stay inside lo one for different place. So member feel nice to us. The inside lo barrow.
He likes the barrow when you have the wave just curled up around you, and he loves it so much because it's like a different world in there. You're just in another world, like you're under the ocean.
I'm Regina Lepping, and Islands on the Front Line is produced by Joe Willer. It's a freewill production for the BBC World Service.
Thanks for listening. We'll have more from the documentary podcast soon. You may have noticed we have given you a bonus episode this week. It's a preview of our major new podcast series, Death in Ice Valley. The preview is short, just over 3 minutes, but it gives you a really good idea of what Death in Ice Valley is all about. And the first episode is available to download now. Search for Death in Ice Valley wherever you find your podcasts.